Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first preview of the World Tour calendar of 2023. Today, we're covering a race that we haven't touched on ever, courtesy of COVID, and it is the Tour Down Under, the 23rd edition. And last time we had the winner of Richie Porte, who's sadly not in the race anymore, and neither is the hill that he's the king of. But more about that later. As always, I'm joined by Mr. Gregor himself, Ewan Wilson, and today we're going to divulge into the route, the favorites, and give a few predictions at the end. So without further ado, Ewan, Tour Down Under, what are your favorite memories of the race?
Well, I don't have an awful lot of memories because as long as this race has been around, I have been living in Europe, which does make the time zones a little bit interesting for us European fans, given that the races end at roughly 4 a.m., 5 a.m. I'm not that nocturnal, so I have usually missed out, but watching the highlights in the mornings was always a highlight of my school years. It feels strange. This is the first Tour Down Under, really, as a sort of adult for me, so I'm intrigued to be watching.
Yeah, it's a great race. Since Australian cycling has also grown over the years, this race has grown even more. 1999, the first edition. There's a few former winners on the start list as well, so that's going to be very interesting. But the fact that we haven't had the race for so long is a bit of a shame, and hopefully we can get more races back to Tour of California. But nevertheless, Ewan, what does the route of the 2023 edition of the Tour Down Under have in store for the riders?
Well, the route for the 2023 Tour Down Under is a little bit different to the routes of years gone by, mainly because things will be opening with a prologue. Yes, a time trial is making its way into Australia's World Tour race. The race will begin with a 5.5 kilometer long time trial around the riverside of Adelaide City Centre, passing by the big cricket arena there, the Adelaide Oval. It's also important to bear in mind that this is the hometown of Rowan Dennis, who will begin this stage as one of the favourites. The day after, we kick things off on the road stage with stage number 1 of the race from Tanunda to Tanunda. This 149 kilometer stage does have a few kickers up its sleeve, with Mengler's Hill, which is 4 kilometers at 3.7%. However, the run into the line is relatively flat. Stage 2 is from Brighton to Victor Harbor, and as the name suggests, we will be going along the coastline, but don't let that fool you, as we are heading inland with a couple of hills and kickers. Nettle Hill being the hardest at 2 kilometers at 8% average gradient. That comes at roughly 20-25 kilometers to go before the run into the line in Victor Harbor, which will be a straightforward promenade run. Stage 3 takes the riders from Norwood to Campbelltown, offering what will be the first of our hilly stages, or sort of proper hilly stages for the contenders for GC here. This is because we have the Corkscrew Hill climb. This has been included in past editions of the Tour Down Under in 2019 and 2016, notably on stages won by Daryl Impey and Simon Gerrans respectively. The climb is at a 9% average gradient over 2.4 kilometers. However, the stage will not end on the climb. It will end after the descent into the town of Campbelltown. Then we move on to stage 4 with some familiar names here, from Port Wollonga to Wollonga Township. Don't let that fool you though, because we're not going up Wollonga Hill, we are just going to the foot of the Wollonga Hill climb. I don't quite know the logic behind this one. It is different to the ordinary Tour Down Under route that we have seen before. This stage has a bit of an uphill kicker. It's got a sort of false flat finale at 2 kilometers at 3% average gradient, which will make it probably a little bit too difficult for the likes of Caleb Ewan, but we could have a tougher, hardier, more unpredictable sprint in the end. And finally, stage 5 will be the last stage of this year's Tour Down Under, from Unley to Mount Lofty. Mount Lofty will be a tough climb, and it will be tackled on 5 occasions on this profile. The mountain statistics run at 9 kilometers at an average gradient of 4%, with the toughest gradients allegedly coming in at 13%. However, the stage is relatively short at 114 kilometers, making this the shortest road stage of this year's Tour Down Under. The difficulty will make it the ultimate and most decisive stage of this week of racing.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ewan. It's a very different route that we're used to with the Tour Down Under, but who can say we're used to any route since it hasn't been here, as we mentioned, for 3 years. Where best to go then with the favorites now, part of our preview. And unfortunately, there is no Richie Porte, and we're not going to cover Trek Segafredo. Sorry, Tesfacion. He's probably going to win the race now. But starting with one of the favorites, Ineos Grenadiers, they're bringing a phenomenally strong team here. Ethan Hayter, of course, both of us, before we recorded this, are thinking him as the favorite winner of the Tour of Poland last year. And you and Ineos Grenadiers and Ethan Hayter, what do you think their chances are here in Australia?
I think this is almost a perfect stage race for Hayter, in a similar way that the Tour of Poland offers a time trial and some sort of less damaging hilly mountain stages. The Tour Down Under is very, very similar this year. In that case, I think Hayter's got a good chance to make time early in the race with the opening prologue. We saw last year as well in the early part of the season at the Tour de la Provence, he hit the ground running in February to get a good result in the opening prologue there, which was 8 kilometers. This one is 6 kilometers. So I think it really does provide some parallels and some signs that he will do well in that time trial. Then going in later into the week, we have some hillier stages with flat finales. We saw at the Tour of Romandy that he could do well in sprints at the end of these kind of lumpier days, and snatch a couple of bonus seconds along the way at the Tour Down Under is always very, very useful. Looking also to that final stage, it's tough, but it's nothing that Ethan Hayter can't really tackle. It's a long climb, but it's nothing very steep. If he can hang in there over the 100 kilometers of the stage, then he's definitely got a good chance to fight for things in the GC. Looking elsewhere into the team, it's stacked with talent, old and new. Geraint Thomas as well is coming here. He brings a lot of experience. Thomas won on Corkscrew Road back in 2013 after attacking away. That was sort of his baptism of fire on the hilly stages, so he does know how to ride in the Tour Down Under. Also looking down this list of riders, Luke Plapp, the reigning Australian champion who just doubled up at the weekend. He obviously shows good legs there. Magnus Sheffield is a fantastic hill rider who's bound for good things this year. And Ben Swift has finished on the podium at this race in the past. And also, we shouldn't underestimate that Ethan is beginning this race with his brother, Leo Hayter, who will be beginning his career at Ineos Grenadiers over in Australia. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Hayter brothers can do together on the quest for Ethan to get his first World Tour win of 2023.
The talent in this team, almost overboard in some sense, but of course, we don't know whether you kind of are. This is the first competitive race. If Ethan Hayter wins, he wouldn't just be the first Ineos Grenadiers rider to win this race. He would also be the first British winner. This race dominated by Australians, as we know. Well, we think it's the only World Tour stage race where you've had a native on every single edition of the podium except 2013. If we're looking towards a team that's going to beat this very equipped team, Jumbo-Visma, they're coming with, as you mentioned already, the home favorite of the first stage in Adelaide, Rohan Dennis, former winner. He can do pretty much everything on a bike, he's shown. And do you think potentially Rohan Dennis and Jumbo-Visma, well, Rohan Dennis and a bunch of Dutch riders, do you think they could potentially get a victory here for the team?
I'm a little bit skeptical towards Rohan Dennis. He hasn't quite showed stage race prestige over the past year. Yes, he rode well at the Romandy, but he finished in 8th overall after leading that race for a while. And to be fair, there aren't many other signs of his time at Jumbo-Visma being sort of exceptional for Rohan Dennis himself. He's been a solid teammate, but to be honest, we've seen him perform better in the past. In particular, that year he took the win in 2015. Looking down the ranks at Jumbo-Visma, this really isn't an A-class Jumbo squad. We're looking towards Robert Haysink, Timo Rosen, the Dutch champion, Milan Varda, who's making his comeback from an RC crash as well. I mean, it's not lighting my fire, to be honest. I don't think Jumbo-Visma are a team bound for the podium at this year's Tour Down Under. I mean, it would be a great story if Rohan Dennis could win the opening stage in his hometown.
He's certainly one of the favorites for that, the two-time world champion. But let's shift the focus to a more interesting squad overall, almost made up of only Australasian riders. UAE Team Emirates, no Slovenians, no UAE team or no Emirates riders. Jane Vine, George Bennett, those two riders looks like they're going to head this up. And Ewan, what do you think of this team? They've got plenty of strong riders for this very punchy course that we have in Australia.
Yeah, we're also going to see Alessandro Covi, Mark Hirschi, Finn Fisher-Black, Michael Vink. It's a really stacked squad that brings a lot of talent in the hills. They've done well in this race in the past, looking towards Diego Ulissi, who's always ridden well at this sort of time of year and in this part of the world. He is not on the start list, but they could sort of try to channel the energy of Ulissi down under through Corvi or through Jay Vine and George Bennett. I mean, I'm super optimistic about this squad. It always helps with a little bit of expertise on these kind of roads and this kind of racing. Jay Vine, George Bennett, Michael Vink and Finn Fisher-Black all bring that. Michael Vink in particular is used to riding at this top level in the wintertime. He's always been secluded in New Zealand over the past couple of years, riding the New Zealand circuit races and some of the Australian races, which often happen during this winter period. I think we shouldn't underestimate the fact that a lot of these riders haven't been riding in this part of the world or during this time of year over the past couple of years due to the COVID break. So it definitely makes me more favorable towards UAE, and I think they're going to have a really good shot. I won't be able to tell you which one of their riders is going to be their best shot.
Yeah, I was going to say that as well. It's just any one of those riders could be the rider that they choose to ride for.
Even short backs could surprise people with a stage win or a podium on a stage.
Yeah, I was gonna say stage win, not overall. But who would you ride for in these? Like Jay Vine, is the climbs not hard enough for him?
Yeah,
long enough even.
I don't think the climbs are hard nor long enough for him. Bennett as well. We saw Bennett. He's ridden well at the Gran Piemonte in the past and at Lombardia. Yes, they were during the COVID season of 2020, but he is a guy who is reliable, has good racing in his legs. Similarly, I'd really like to see them go for Corvi. I am a bit of an Alessandro Corvi fanboy. I think he's a bit underrated. Got a good kick on him at the end of a hard day.
I hope they ride for, well, who do I ride? Well, any of them. Mark Hirschi, 2020 would, that would be quite a story. But nevertheless, moving on from UAE Team Emirates, let's go to EF Education EasyPost, where we have two. We're gonna definitely have a bit of a jostle for who we think they should be riding for. They are bringing rider who's been on the channel before, Miguel Honoré. Very nice guy, and one of their new signings for the season, and also one of the riders you're particularly fond of, Alberto Bettiol. So they have other riders as well that I'm sure you're going to divulge into. Who do you think should be leading EF Education EasyPost in their first World Tour race here of the season?
Well, this is Miguel Honoré's first race for EF, which is it's always difficult to see riders hit the ground running super successfully at the first race with a new team. It doesn't happen that often. Maybe Miguel Honoré will see success after being with Quickstep for a number of years. He's now getting his own chance really to search out success here at the Tour Down Under. And this route, you would say, would suit Honoré. There are some stages that they look tough, but not tough enough to isolate Honoré. A couple of uphill sprints as well do favor him. The stage to Willunga Township in particular looks a little bit like that Giro stage back in 2020, the one in Sicily where he finished in the top 5, rode really well. Ulissi won the stage in the end, but Honoré was really contending things. So I would suggest he also has a pretty good shout at doing well. But I mean, I've got to back my boy, and my boy is Alberto Bettiol. When I look at this year's Tour Down Under, it kind of reminds me of the Étoile de Bessèges. I'm not sure if you get the same vibes. I know French racing and Australian racing is incredibly different.
I thought Étoile de Bessèges was a bit shallower in the climbs, more sprint focus. Okay,
I mean a little bit, yes. But one man who's done particularly well at the Étoile de Bessèges in the past is Mr. Bettiol. He is a guy who's super hardy, super tough, and he can sprint at the end of it. He is a bit of a wild dog. He blows hot and cold. We can't really gauge his form particularly well. He was on holiday back in the Maldives in October, so we've seen that he's taken some time out, probably riding and gearing up his form for the new year here in Australia. If there are any parallels between Australia and former performances from Bettiol, looking towards maybe his performances in the US, which have been good, and Canada, the urban planning there is quite similar to Australia. Australians, please don't get too angry in the comment section. Blocks, lots of right hands, wide roads, as well as in Japan at the Olympic Games back in 2021. Bettiol rode really strongly on that stage, had a bike problem and was sort of thrown out the mix, but he was riding in that front group for a lot of the sort of tough climbs up that race. That was a hot day, and the roads similarly there were quite sort of rigid. So why not Bettiol? Let's go for my boy.
I hope you reflect that in the predictions. But Miguel Honoré, it was actually his first race when he went with Quickstep, starting as a World Tour Neo-Pro, and unfortunately didn't finish the race because he was sick. So maybe he wants to come back and get one over Australian climate. But nevertheless, moving on to a team we probably should have started with, Jayco AlUla, what was before Bike Exchange, Orica, Green Edge, whatever you want to call it. They have now, we can call them Jayco. They are coming with a very strong team. Michael Matthews, Simon Yates, Luke Durbridge, Lucas Hamilton, Michael Hepburn, new boy Chris Harper, and Campbell Stewart. And Ewan, they've won this race a number of times with Simon Gerrans in the past, and they really know how to race on these roads. So how do you see their chances?
I don't think Simon Yates is winning this race. I'll say that now. I don't think the route is tough enough for Yates to even, dare I say, win a stage. I think Matthews is probably their best card in the GC. I'm not buying the Lucas Hamilton argument. I've heard it too many times from Australians. I think that Michael Matthews is really going to be their top dog here. He rode well at the Nationals at the weekend. He lacked that firepower, but he was still climbing really strongly, pushing on the climbs, challenging the likes of Ben O'Connor and so forth, and Caleb Ewan. And we've also seen as well over the past year that Michael Matthews has become hardier. He was up there at the Tour de France last year, really fighting on those hilly stages. The stage he won to Mont had a nasty kicker towards the end. And I mean, if he can do that, he can definitely be there at Corkscrew Road. The statistics of those climbs are very, very similar. So I would suggest that he is probably their best card to play, and he could probably end up on the podium.
So anyways, now moving on to Israel Premier Tech, who unfortunately are now demoted to a pro continental side, but that doesn't mean we're not going to talk about them. And Ewan, you have particular interest in them right now. Not only are they coming with the two-time champion Daryl Impey, they also have a number of other strong cards and a very Australian heavy team.
Yeah, this team do have a very anglophone core. They've brought Chris Froome, Impey, Simon Clark, Corbin Strong, Taj Jones, Seb Berwick, and Derek Gee here. And Sam Bewley is going to be making his debut as a director sportif here. And so it is, I mean, a very experienced squad with a lot of knowledge of the roads and the Santos Tour Down Under. Daryl Impey's won a stage that mirrors the stage on Corkscrew Road back in 2019. That wasn't that long ago, let's be honest. And he still was winning stages over the past 2 years whilst he's been riding for Israel Premier Tech, even if he has turned his hand to YouTube. Nevertheless, the rider I'm most interested here is Simon Clark. At the Australian Championships the weekend, he was phenomenal. I would say he was the best rider in that race. I know it was won by Luke Plapp, but Simon Clark was really, really strong. Over the climbs, he looked effortless, was hanging onto the group, and then on the descents and through the flat sections, he was really just rolling with every single punch that went. Once Plapp made the final move, people started looking around, and Simon Clark missed it, but he did still outsprint Michael Matthews in the end. So I have a feeling that Simon Clark's really going to bring something to this. He's hungry, and he wants to get something out of this race in his home nation.
So before we move on to the predictions, we'll just have a few outsiders. We can't cover them all. Former winner of the race, Luis Leon Sanchez, is heading up the Astana squad, we believe. Ben O'Connor, the Tour de France hero of 2021, is leading the AG2R squad and could look to do something here. We also have Michael Storer from Groupama FCJ, who has a very punchy nature in his riding, and he could definitely be up here when the stage goes uphill. Equally, Kiwi Patrick Bevan, riding for his new team, Team DSM, could be looking for more success as he did very well in the 2020 edition. And we can't not mention winner for Australia, Jayed Hindley, who's heading up the Bora Hansgrohe squad, but both Ewan and I don't think it's his time. He will be going for the Tour de France, and make sure to check out our Bora Hansgrohe preview about that, where we had an in-depth discussion about his chances at the Tour, but he's not part of our Santos Tour Down Under speculations. But nevertheless, Ewan, let's head into our predictions. And who is your top three of this first World Tour of the 2023 season?
I've actually changed my top three as we've gone along with this video. I think third place is going to go to Pello Bilbao. We didn't talk about him, but he's super reliable. He can sprint, he can climb, he can time trial. He seems like a very safe pick here. Second place goes to Simon Clark, and the winner will be Ethan Hayter of Ineos Grenadiers.
Benefit of going first there. Yeah. I thought you were going to pick Froome. You were saying before this, you're going to pick Froome.
Well, what can I say?
Third will be the 2015 winner, Rowan Dennis, who will lose the leader's jersey that he acquired on stage one. Second place will be Miguel Honoré, obviously, and then winner Ethan Hayter. So we're on the same page here. We're going to finish on a bonus round, and the bonus round will, of course, be a former winner. Why not the two-time champion Daryl Impey? Where will he finish in this year's race?
I think he'll finish in 9th.
I'm going to say he finishes in 25th. So anyways, that's basically it for our first preview of the World Tour season. Make sure to check out our article about the race as well on www.thecyclingdane.com. And of course, make sure to comment down below who you think is going to win the race. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel, like the video. And as always, thank you for watching and have a nice day.